Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is the Board of Trustees' regular meeting, it's May 26, 2020. It is 9:07 a.m. This is meeting number 2020-09. Jane, please take the roll.
President Barry,
Here.
Trustee Desmond,
Here.
Trustee Phelan,
Here.
Trustee Vorder,
Here.
Trustee Mallow,
Here.
Trustee Stalker,
Here.
and Trustee Oliniechek.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Would everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to
To the flag of the United States of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
full.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, public comments. Jane, do we have any public comments today?
You know what, I didn't check the book.
Okay,
I don't think so.
while she's checking,
You want to just check that, Paul? It's right there.
There's no public comments.
thank you. We're informed by council, there's no public comments.
About the
Thank
book?
you. And does anyone have a conflict to disclose with any item on tonight's agenda, or this morning's agenda? Hearing none, we're going to start with agenda item 5, approval of meeting minutes for the regular meeting minutes 2020-08, dated May 12th, 2020. May I have a motion on 5, please?
Motion to approve.
That was trustee Mallow, seconded by trustee Phelan. Any discussion? Call a vote, please.
Trustee Desmond,
Yes.
Trustee Phelan,
Yes.
Vorder,
Yes.
Trustee Mallow,
Yes.
Trustee Stalker,
Yes.
Trustee Oliniechek.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 6 is new business by village trustees. We're going to start in District 1. Trustee Desmond.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no new business other than to, just, I guess, thank the people for behaving so responsibly. If the goal was to flatten the curve, I think that has been achieved. Everybody, you go out, you see people wearing masks. I think people have been very responsive to this pandemic, and hopefully we can move forward and get back to normal as much as possible. That's all I have.
Thank you. District 2, Trustee Oliniechek.
Yeah, just echoing on what Trustee Desmond had to say. It's good to see that there's been some forward progress. I hope to see a lot more and sooner based off of the scientific information that we're seeing. But yeah, I've talked to many of the small businesses. They're looking forward to opening up. I know some of them are opening up their outdoor dining and making some accommodations to start getting people in there, so that's a good thing. Secondly, I just want to comment, we just went through some storms again. We had some pretty horrific storms that came through, and it was nice to see that our power was able to maintain some good stability. So, ComEd, we need you to keep up the press that you've been doing with the infrastructure improvements. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Oliniechek, can you just say, checking the microphone, can you just say something while Tom Swa is standing right there?
Did you hear anything I said?
Yes, now we hear it. Now we can hear it. Do you want to repeat anything?
Yeah, I just want to repeat on the opening up of the businesses, especially the restaurants and bars. I think it's a good move forward. We have some excitement among some of our existing restaurants that are going to be opening up some outdoor dining al fresco, and I know that they've asked for some help with that, and the reasonableness of the help I don't think is a bad thing, so that they could expand their outdoor dining and drinking experience. But I do believe that with what we're seeing in the state of Illinois, if we reasonably can continue these good results, I would ask that the governor look strongly upon this to allow indoor dining with reasonable accommodations as quickly as possible. And then the other thing is, with the storms that have come through in the last week, the infrastructure improvements that Commonwealth Edison has done obviously are paying off. We had some small, nothing major, and I know in the years in the past when we'd have that much storm and winds coming through, we would have seen a lot of power outages. So we want ComEd to keep up the infrastructure improvements that they're doing. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Trustee Oliniechek. Let's move on to District 3, Trustee Mallow.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No new business today. Thank you.
Thank you. District 4, Trustee Vorderer.
Yes, Mayor, I'd just like to take a moment to thank the men and women who've given their lives. We celebrated it yesterday for the freedom and security of the United States of America. And hopefully, shortly, we will go back to enjoying all those here in Illinois. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. District 5, Trustee Stalker.
Nothing new at this time, thank you.
Thank you. District 6, Trustee Phelan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to follow up with Trustee Desmond Oliniechek's comments relative to the reopening and the coronavirus. And I think we've all, for the better part of 3+ months, have worked hard to address the problem. And one of the things that I grow increasingly frustrated with is this comment that comes from elected officials that they are following the science, as if the science has been settled, that everybody agrees on the science, that it's at one place that you can click on and see there's the science. As we've seen more and more, unfortunately, everything gets politicized. I think people more often than not now are gravitating toward the science, that they want to support their positions. And, as people know here, I'm a person who follows data very closely. And I think in this situation, the data is the science, because the data can't be disputed. And it was good to hear the governor say specifically, I believe for the first time, that local authorities now, mayors in particular, he is looking to us and our mayor to do everything we can to help our local businesses, including restaurants and bars. Very specific when he said that. And I think we need to do that. I think we see these reports of all of these people being reckless, gathering in different places like Ocean City, Maryland, and Florida, and the Ozarks. And you could call it reckless, and probably is relative to what we know. But as the body of evidence grows, it's clearly suggesting by the data, and it's nothing new, that elderly people with health issues are the ones who need to be the most cautious. And that doesn't mean that everybody else can throw caution to the wind, but we're also seeing now videos of people attacking people for not wearing masks, vilifying them, chasing them down the streets. And I don't think that's correct either. Because I will say this about these people who are being reckless. If we wanted to do anything relative to this virus at the beginning, it'd have been great to say, boy, can we get some test studies out there? And we're seeing videos of large gatherings in the city again, large police presence. And what we don't see, at least I've not seen it, if someone can show it to me, are stories about huge spikes in hospitalizations and deaths in these areas. And that doesn't mean that we should, again, throw caution to the wind. But again, the balance, as the mayor said to me one time, we need to strike the balance. And I agree with her. And I think the balance needs to be shifting more aggressively toward reopening, getting people back to work who are not susceptible, doing everything we can to protect those who are, specifically in our nursing homes. I'd like to, more than ever know how much resources are being devoted from the state to our nursing homes. Zach Riddle, our assistant fire chief, said they're doing a pretty good job. But that's where the problem is. Elderly people with medical conditions living in group environments is where we need to devote a lot of resources. And then we also need people to get back to work, to school, to get the economy going again, to support all those people that are in these group homes, because many of them, as we know, are on Medicare. So I know we're going to talk about this later, but I did want to make that point. That's all I have today.
Awesome, thank you. Chief, Village Manager's Report.
Good morning, Board and Mayor. Just a couple things I'd like to discuss. Again, as everybody knows with the COVID situation, the village is still, every day, I'm meeting with the Finance Department and all the department heads trying to figure out how we're going to do this with the limited funds that we're going to get in from the tax base once the business do start going back. So I'll be discussing a couple things in an executive session with the board. But the other thing I would like to bring to the board's attention is on the agenda today will be the contract between the MAP 309, which is police, and the booking officers. I just want to remind the board that this interaction had been taking place prior to COVID and everything else. So some of those numbers had been presented by former village manager Larry Deachin. And we were going to interest arbitration with the police officers, and we were able to negotiate enough to where we were able to pull it out of that and save probably a lot in legal fees. So I just wanted to make that, that information available to the board.
Okay, thank you.
That's my report.
Thank you very much. And have we set a date, Chief, to open Village Hall?
Yes, we're looking at June 1st, but we're going to phase in like we phased down. What we're going to do is we'll open up the Village Hall to normal pedestrian traffic and business on the first level. We'll keep the basement closed for now, but if anybody needs to have business with them, they can come up and deal with the folks while they're behind the glass. And we are working on getting the basement set up with some spit shields and some other things so the employees down there won't have to have that face-to-face contact with some of the public as far as without having that barrier. So we're working on that as well, and we hope to have that basement open hopefully by the middle of the month.
That's awesome. Thank you, Chief. So for now, residents should still go to the website, find the contact info for what they need. Thank you very much.
That is correct.
Mayor, may I say something?
Trustee Phelan.
Thank you. I just want to compliment the chief and the men and women of the police department. For as long as I've been involved on the government of Oak Lawn, the village board, and that goes now 15, 16 years on or off, time and again, professional, fair, come to the table, non-threatening. I can't even remember the last time, if we did go to arbitration, it was extensive or costly, but there always has been this reasonable approach and understanding of our situation, our tax base, our overburdened residents and businesses. So I just want to compliment you, Chief, and the men and women of the department for, again, a great job.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Item 8, the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are routine and have been brought forward at the direction of the Board of Trustees and will be enacted with one motion. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. 8A is Ordinance 200924, an ordinance amending certain sections of Title 1, Chapter 15 of the Oak Lawn Municipal Code. B is Ordinance 200925, an ordinance extending the permit application deadline for the PUD variance at 9609 South Keeler. Resolution, C is Resolution 200923, a resolution approving an agreement between the Village of Oak Lawn and the Metropolitan Alliance of Police representing Oak Lawn patrol officers. D is Resolution 200924, a resolution approving an agreement between the Village of Oak Lawn and the Metropolitan Alliance of Police representing the Oak Lawn detention officers. E, Resolution 200925, a resolution approving the bid of United Enterprise LLC for the 2020 concrete repairs program. F, Resolution 200926, a resolution approving the bid of Davis Concrete Construction Company pursuant to the 2020 sidewalk replacement program. G, Resolution 200927, a resolution approving an engagement letter with Austin Mead Financial Limited. H, motion to approve the cancellation of the last meetings in June, July, and August of the Board of Trustees' regular meeting. May I have a motion on item 8, please?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Trustee Mallow made that motion. Do we have a
Second.
Trustee Phelan, I think, or Trustee Stalker. Thank you, guys. Even harder to hear everyone with the masks on. Trustee Stalker is our second. Any discussion?
Have item G removed, please.
Item G, okay. Any other discussion, gentlemen? Okay, let's call the motion on item 8 with the exception of item G.
Trustee Desmond?
Yes.
Trustee Phelan?
Yes.
Trustee Vorder?
Yes.
Trustee Mallow?
Yes.
Trustee Stalker?
Yes.
Trustee Oliniechek? Trustee Oliniechek?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello? Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, thank you. Item 8G is Resolution 200927, a resolution approving an engagement letter with Austin Mead Financial Limited. May I have a Motion on 8G.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Trustee Phelan made that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Trustee Mallow is our second. Any discussion? Trustee Phelan?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The board has seen the engagement letter, the proposal from Dan Denny's from Austin Mead. Myself, the village manager, and Brian Hannigan, finance director, met with Dan. He came highly recommended both by our council and by a developer who I contacted. And the best way to explain what I would say the need, and I'll defer to Brian, who's more technically capable of commenting on Dan, is for years, we've dealt with or been advised by people with general expertises relative to bonds or TIFs, and primarily their expertise was legal. They're attorneys with a lot of experience in TIFs and bonds, and Dan Denny's from Austin Mead Financial was what I would call a specialist, because if you saw his engagement letter and his background, he actually is a CPA like Brian. I think Brian, same firm, I guess. In our meeting, they might even crossed over at some point. So we got his background in the technical aspect, which is tax and accounting, and then got a master's in management from Kellogg School, Northwestern Business School, one of the best in the country. What I like about him, he's the former senior manager of government services at Pete Marwick, and then he was the former head of public finance at Northern Trust. And when we met him, he also spoke about, I think, was it a year or two, Brian, where he got into like a technical, almost application relative to bond finance. So he's intimately familiar with bonds, how they're priced, how they're taken to the market. And then he's since become, or at the same time was, an expert in TIF finance. And the reason I think this is so compelling when it was presented to me, and then I asked Brian and Chief to meet with him, is, our situation was complex before this crisis. Now it's been magnified between the shortfalls in revenues. We have these TIFs that we're trying to get done both across 95th Street. We have the development at Stony Creek that we're trying to finish, and of which we'll talk about in executive session. And I had asked Brian and the chief to meet with Dan and then sat in on this meeting just so that we can see if he might bring a level of expertise that maybe we've been missing. And I will ask Brian or Chief if you want to comment further. I was very impressed with the guy. He's a Burbank resident originally, knows the area very well. If you saw the list of the communities he served or has served, it's extensive, many of our neighboring towns. And he just has, I would call, a creative approach that I think, given Brian's institutional knowledge and experience, the two of them, I think could really do us a good service here, reasonably priced. And also, Brian is quick to pick up on the engagement, challenging some of the aspects of it. I understand he changed a few things. So a very agreeable person to come in and advise us in this difficult time. So, Brian, if you want to add anything.
Do you want to go? The only thing I would add is that one of the things that when Tom and Randy and I met with Dan, I think the board, look, we don't know, none of us has every idea out there. So I think having another oar in the boat is a good thing. And I think this is going to add an advisor that's purely for Oak Lawn and some of the things that we're faced with. And Tom has alluded to this in many other board meetings about our pension issues. Whether a pension bond makes sense or not in today's market, given interest rates, I think help us with that. Generally speaking, I've sort of been against those things because I always view it that you're leveraging up the village's balance sheet to fund your IRA, okay, or similar to that. But I think given today's market and all the things that have happened to this body and to this village over the last 90 days, I think having someone like Dan that can bounce ideas off, he can, as Tom said, and Tom's being a little unfair to himself, I think he's got a lot of institutional knowledge, so I think it'll be a team approach, and I think we'll come back to the board at some point in the future with maybe some ideas that can help. Once we find out also what this second $2 trillion package is going to mean to the village. So there's things like that. So anyway, just to finish off what Tom said, I think having a pure advisor just for the village as opposed to the things we have with water and all, we've had dispatch. We all know what we do for other towns here. This is purely for village residents, so I think it'll be a very good thing.
Chief,
Sorry.
anything to add?
Yeah, I would concur with Brian and Tom on this. I'm not a real finance man, don't know a lot about the financial aspect, which was why I rely on Brian and Tom a lot with that. But talking to, to this guy and watching what he's done in the other communities and how he's structured the bond as far as to deal with the pension issue and how we're not constantly going to be chasing that interest now. If this plan will work, as he's, kind of showing us, I believe that we can start paying down the debt rather than constantly chasing the interest on it. So that was kind of interesting to watch how he plotted that out. So I hope it works. I think it'll help the village a lot, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Thank you, Chief.
And if I could add one more thing, Mayor.
Wait, Tom.
To those listening out there, Brian said it best. Pension bonds, on their face, forever and a day, you balk at them because it amounts to ostensibly borrowing to pay, as Brian said, retirement debt later down the road. But given the way pension law is structured, especially in this state, and when we talked to Dan Denny's, he really got into the weeds on this. And, I'll be the first to admit it gets complicated. But we will, as Brian and Pat O'Donnell did when I was off the board, determine, and I think shared with this board, that pensions will go to zero if we don't do something. And you couple that with an aggressive funding policy that, as much as we think we're putting in, and I have the percentage that we're putting into the general fund budget, Brian, was it 16%? It's still not going to be enough. And now we have the threat of the intercept letters, right? Although both the police and fire, thankfully, were helpful in saying as long as we keep to some level of payment. Well, Dan has shown us a couple of examples. He hasn't shown us Oak Lawn yet, and that's one of the things that I think we're referencing here is by restructuring things. And yes, it amounts to borrowing money, but the amount of money we're funding now ostensibly could pay the lion's share of that funding and get us a higher level of funding, potentially 100% funding. Now, I did say during the meeting, it'd be great to be 100% funded, but everyone around us is 30 and 40, and the federal government comes in and sells a 100-year bond, and why do we do that? Why don't we all wait to go bankrupt? It's a bad policy. It's a bad thought, and I actually hold that thought. It's like being the smartest person in the dumb room. If we're all going down, but as Brian will tell you on our S&P and Moody's calls, as hard as we've tried, as good a job as I think we've done with taxes and funding, all they talk about, right, Brian, is pension funding and intercept letters and threats. So Dan is not a proponent of doing bonds for bond's sake. He was the first to tell you, and that's one of the things I liked about him. He said, you'll meet people out there who know they can make money by just doing bonds, refinancings, new bonds. His metric is he likes to see savings of, I think he might have said 3% before even entertaining the notion of a bond. So I think Brian said it perfectly. A true advisor, not compensated by bond generation, right? And Brian, I think, will address that with the chief when it comes to that time. There won't be a percentage of a bond. There won't be a commission of sorts. He will be paid a fee that we'll negotiate if we do any type of bond, including refinancing. I think given all those things, I think this guy can help us. Now, we may just see what he proposes, like he did with Decatur and some others. He showed us some detailed charts. It may not make sense to us, but I think, as Brian said, with rates being as low as they are, with the market somewhat off highs, if ever there was a time to entertain this notion, and again, the pressures of our pension funds and the threats of intercept letters, it's like
I was just going to say, Tom, Tom just alluded to the intercept letter, just so we're clear, we're still not there with what the state minimum is, and that funding level at 90%, to Tom's point. So we'll just have to see what Dan comes back with. I think he had towns like Berwyn, I think he mentioned in our meeting, where they've done sort of a staggered funding. So we'll just have to see some of the other products he's put out there and see if they work for us. So anyway.
That's it,
But
Mayor.
I wholly recommend hiring Dan and his firm.
Thank you. Any
Why
other
not? Yeah, I
questions,
just have a
Trustee
question.
Desmond?
Restructuring these bonds, would they do anything, pay off the tips?
Well, the
We can generate that tax revenue?
restructure, you mean that,
What Thomas talking with this, Dan Dennehy, I mean,
well, he's going to look, we have a call Friday So each piece of our debt in our capital structure, I think we're try to address, Tim. So each one of them, as I've met with Tom already on, there are some micro issues with respect to a particular bond that you just have to consider. For example, some of them have not hit their redemption date. We did Build America bonds. Trustee Olenichik knows all too well when we did those, that was in 2000. That first redemption date is in August. So I think, to answer your question, I think we're going to look at each piece of debt, including the TIF debt, which is another part of this village that has been sort of, it's not the albatross that pensions are in terms of having to fund them, but they weren't structured. I think this board all knows what happened at 111th and some of the downtown TIFs. By downtown, I mean obviously 95th, but I think each one of those pieces of debt is going to get addressed.
Okay, so but those tips could be included in this?
They could be, they could be, yes.
If it's obviously financially beneficial.
Well, the issue with,
What I'm saying is that there's no timeline or that needs to be, there's nothing to stop us from doing it, right?
no, there's nothing to prevent us from doing it other than calendar and when a particular bond had a redemption date in it. But like I said, I think there's one coming up in August. And it's,
And to Tim's point, I think too, we were talking about the pensions, the bonds, but Tim's talking about TIFs, which is another thing, and there's also budget, and there's funding, and there's, to this point, he is a specialist in all of these areas. So it's not as if he's just gonna come in and look at bonds and say, here, do a bond. He also is gonna talk to Brian and help us with TIFs, and they look at maybe how you can change your incentives around. He's got a lot of experience in there. So I think the answer to your question is yes, he will. They may not be related, but anything we can save anywhere, gonna go
So
general fund, yeah.
it's not just,
Not just
the
pensions.
focus is, Tom just said, is the general fund, whatever's going to benefit that, so.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, let's call the vote on 8G, please.
Trustee Desmond?
yes,
Trustee Phelan?
Yes.
Trustee Vorderer?
Yes.
Trustee Mallow?
Yes.
Trustee Stalker?
Yes.
Trustee Olenichik?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. 9 is Resolution 200928, a resolution waiving the competitive bidding requirements and awarding CDS Office Technologies a contract to provide 25 Panasonic Toughbooks for police. May I have a motion on 9, please?
make that motion to approve.
Thank you. Trustee Desmond made the motion, second
Second.
by Trustee Stalker. Thank you. Any discussion, gentlemen?
If I could make
Yes,
a
Chief.
comment, Mayor. All these are being purchased with the Oklahoma Police Department seizure
Excellent.
fund, so it saves the general fund as well.
So drug dealers and criminals are
They're
paying.
paying for our computers.
I like that. Thank you very much.
That was my question. For the computers?
Yes, computer, laptop for the, inside the cars.
A nice name, Tough Books.
That's it.
Yeah, those you could pretty much throw and they.
Oh, okay, so they're the computer. that have-
Yeah, they have the casing, real hard casing. They also mount in the squad, so,
Yeah, so,
yeah,
next.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any other discussion? Let's call the vote on 9, please.
Trustee Desmond?
Yes,
Trustee Phelan?
Yes.
Trustee Vorderer?
Yes.
Trustee Mallow?
Yes.
Trustee Stalker?
Yes.
Trustee Olenichik?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. This is item 10, discussion of state plan to authorize outdoor dining for bars and restaurants and action to amend village regulations to assist local businesses that choose to reopen, including the waiver of permit fees. And this is worded kind of strangely, because it's changing pretty much by the minute with what's going on. So I'd like a motion, please. Well, we don't need to do that. I'm going to lead off the discussion. Many of our businesses, it's really hard to breathe with this thing. Be patient with me, please. Many of our businesses have, been begging to reopen. Now we see an opportunity. And, the village of Oak Lawn is set up in a very traditional way. You have a business parking lot and alleys and whatnot. There's not naturally a lot of outdoor dining, but presently the governor's orders only permit outdoor dining. So I put this on here so we can do whatever's necessary to get these businesses what they need as quickly as possible. whether it's waiving permit fees, whether it's streamlining the process. We've had dozens of reach outs from businesses on what to do. And so I want to open this up to the board. Trustee Stalker.
Yeah, I'd just like to state that, in my opinion, restaurants and bars have been given an unfair seat in this party. They've been forced to close. There are ways for them to serve food by call-in sales and drop-off services and things like that. But it's awfully difficult to pay the expenses that are just normal, everyday carrying charges of owning a restaurant building. Food that they've got on hand is going to spoil, and it's awfully tough on these people. The margins are tight as it is, and anything we can do to help the restaurant and tavern business stay open during this difficult time, in my opinion, is what we should do. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Phelan.
Yes, Mayor, I couldn't agree more with Bud. In addition to the revenue that we derive from these restaurants and bars, and not to suggest that other retailers or stores don't provide enjoyment or fulfillment. I mean, it'd be hard to argue that the restaurants and bars are not the lifeblood of our village, the reason we gather and meet one another and share memories and stories. I mean, all those things that we all agree are important, but as Bud said, it is one of the toughest businesses out there. I was watching closely, as was I think Trustee Mallow, the developments in Springfield relative to the gaming law and the license for the casino in the city, hoping upon hope that somehow they would come to their senses and recut the pie for us on the gaming tax. But again, when you look at it from a pure revenue standpoint, we need our restaurants and bars to thrive, and we need many of them. If you follow franchise, there's operations out there that are going to probably go out of business. Some in our town, without naming names, hopefully they can spin some off and keep some alive. But I think we need to do everything we can, and I applaud the mayor for putting this on the agenda. One of the things I was suggesting, based on the village attorney's recommendation, is anybody who owns a restaurant or bar, as you know, we have 95th Street coming down, middle of our town, makes it difficult or dangerous, if you will, to do, alternative seating or outdoor service. But if anyone is going to do it, to put together a plan for us to review, at least to submit it to us so that we can be aware of it. Police chief, the police chief would also have to weigh in, I suspect. Paul pointed out for one of his businesses who asked, make sure that landlords are on board and the insurance is indemnifying, and, check all these boxes, but allow these businesses to get back to the business of serving people and bringing much-needed revenue to Oak Lawn.
Thank you. Trustee Desmond.
It's great that we're waiving the permit fees, but I wonder if we could do, sometimes for people not used to filling out these waivers, I mean, it can be a little overwhelming. What
Yeah.
waiver are we using? Can we simplify it to?
The goal of this discussion is to simplify as much as we can and green light as much as we can and as much as you guys are comfortable with. If the board would like to say, from now through whatever date, there's many ways to do it. The process is streamlined, this is the process. But we need to direct staff what to do when all these people are calling. What is the best way to get everyone up and running quickest? I just, any ideas out there? Permit fee waiving was an easy thing.
Yeah.
If there's, construction they need to be doing, or, we should look at any idea we have.
I guess that's what I'm saying. If they have to fill out a building permit fee to put tables on the sidewalk,
Right.
they
But
shouldn't have to go through all that. And as well, I mean, if we have 20, 30 restaurants all filing at the same time,
Right.
I mean, is there going to be a massive backlog then? I mean, do they have to be in?
It will be a lot of work, certainly, but I think the village has to have some part in and knowledge of what's going on, and just not say, do whatever you want.
Oh, of course, I agree.
Because, we, just want to make sure it's safe and all of the,
I guess what I'm suggesting, maybe we just create a simplified permit just for this that can be done online.
Yeah, I think, we have to make sure, there's two ways to do this. One is, let's talk about like Francesca's, for example. So they have outdoor dining already and want to expand it, and it's in a parking lot already. So that's different than someone like Stacked, for example, who doesn't have a parking lot to use necessarily and might need to go into the street and ask the village for, vacating part of the street temporarily or something like that. There's all these different scenarios, and I don't know, if one simple form will do it. If it's in their own parking lot, I think it's easy to do. But the area like between Palermo's and the Whistle and the Children's Museum, all of those have an alley that we could access. We need to look at that. But then how do people get in and out of there? I mean, it's complicated, so I don't think a simple form, but I think all resources should be put to, getting this done.
If I can add a couple comments, Mayor. I talked to Don McKenna down in permitting. Some of the issues are going to be, and we've already been getting calls from certain businesses. Some of them want to use tents. They want to put tents up. But there's going to be restrictions within that too, within the guidelines of the governor's order. They'll have to have the sides up, they'll have to have spacing in there still. We're talking about code violations possibly if they're serving food out there or have to inspect them. You're going to have electrical issues if they're running electric out to this tent. That has to be inspected. It's going to depend on, how big of a bite the village wants to take into this. If you want the businesses just to say, hey, if you want to put a table and chair out there, you have to block off a certain area. There has to be the spacing still. I heard a good idea the other day where somebody said that some of the businesses in another town were actually using some of the parking spaces, like they'd have a car, then they'd have an empty spot, then another car, and then an empty spot, so people could sit in the empty spots and have dinner or whatever. The only problem is somebody goes to leave, you got car exhaust in your face. So,
Right.
There's going to be pluses and negatives with anything that we come up with. But again, I think we have to do this in a way where, we're not going to take the liability on if we're directing them to do a certain thing. So I would advise the board to keep that in mind as well, which I'm sure everybody is.
So with respect to the liquor licenses, I think, I'm comfortable extending that to outdoor dining while this is in effect, and not having them go through extra hurdles. Like, that's an easy one.
That is an easy one.
But the food and bringing food outside, that's a separate kind of thing. Are you guys okay doing the same for that?
Madam Mayor,
Yes,
Madam Mayor, Trustee Oliniechek.
yes, I know.
When it comes to safe food handling, the restaurants that I have talked to, they all understand that it has to go from kitchen to table, unless they would have like an outdoor barbecue type situation. So safe handling and safe practices for food handling would still be in effect. What they're looking for is relief to be able to say that, yes, I can have outdoor dining, and yes, I will have waiters or waitresses bringing it out to them, and I will have the ability to serve. But because the current rules are not allowing people to dine in, that's what they're looking for is relief, is the ability, just like you said, and I do commend you for putting this on the agenda, is just giving them the ability to open up at dining al fresca, not having a lot of red tape to go through and worried about their liquor license, worried about having a outdoor patio type situation. You make a good point. Many of the places that you talk about don't have the ability, and many of them do have the ability. But I think the best thing that I heard coming out of this was that we want to leave it up to our restaurants and our bars to provide us with a plan that will provide safe food handling, social distancing, good hygiene practices, and let us know what they're going to do. But also as a village, if it requires them saying in reasonableness that they need to take 10 parking spaces off of the side of their building, and they're going to barricade them off at their own dime, and they're going to make sure that they're safe and their insurance covers it. I don't think that that's an unreasonable thing for us to do, but Also understanding that we're not going to jeopardize safe food handling, which every one of the restaurants and bars that I talk to, we're not looking to do anything like that. They're just looking for the ability to open up that outdoor experience.
Thank you, Trustee Oliniechek. Any other discussion?
Madam Mayor, just in regards to what Mr. Trustee Oliniechek said, the businesses need to make their decision and come to us, just as one in my district, PD's Lounge, did. And it's for us to decide if that is reasonable and going to be able to be done. So I think it's important that we don't have to think of their ideas; they have to come to us.
But, yeah, I agree with that, but if they all come at the same time and they have to wait for us for approval, is it one person is making the decision? They have to go out and inspect it. So it could delay some businesses from opening at the same time.
Right. I think they've already been thinking about it. So I think they have to make the decision on whether they want to do it, yes or no. So I think that's where it comes to. I mean, some of these, they're just not going to be able to do it. They're going to have to stick with delivery. They're not. It would probably cost some businesses more to be able to start doing outside dining. So they may just stick with their delivery. Certain Jedis I know is killing it with delivery. They're doing a good job. That people have come to them and ordered and I mean, it's probably not as good as it was, but whether or not they have a big parking lot and they want to put the money into doing outside dining, that's up to them to decide.
Hey, Chief, can you see if Don McKenna can come here? Maybe it'd be nice to hear from him what he needs businesses to do.
Oh, he must have went.
Hey, Madam Mayor, if I can, while we're waiting on Don,
Sure.
I was going to suggest too, Chief, you talked about opening back up and slow rolling it back in, perhaps bringing some of the employees that you were thinking of bringing later on, bringing them in immediately to Tim's point and devote their efforts to helping Don, in any capacity they can, compiling information, checking off boxes, making certainly we need people who are skilled in Don's area, but there, I suspect, can be others who can help in the process. So it's not just Don and Michelle and 20 people, as Tim said, waiting, to get their process moved along.
Right.
No, we actually brought all the employees back for the village today. So today, we're bringing everybody back in to get reacclimated, to make sure that they know how to, work in their environment, their space, clean their space, those kind of things. So we will have the additional personnel to help with that. But I do agree with Trustee Mallow and Trustee Oliniechek's position of, I think we should let the businesses bring to us what their plan is. We review it in an expedient way, and I think that's why we want to keep the permit process, so then we still have control of it to make sure that they're doing what they're allowed to do, and it's safe, but yet then the onus is not on us to come up with ideas for them. And I think a lot of them, as a lot of the trustees have mentioned already, have already been thinking about this and how they can make the transition back.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Trustee Oliniechek.
I think the board should always keep in mind that whether we run a fest at a church or whether we run Ball on the Green, those types of temporary dwellings and the types of electronic hookups for that and the types of service, all are safe. And people just need to keep in mind that if a business operator is looking to put up a tent, and yes, if the chief mentioned not having the sides in, and as long as it's a safe, again, we want to make sure people understand that we are there to help them, and they have to use reasonableness in how they operate. But I think if you really look at, putting up a tent outside of a building and making sure that the food is served from the outside, with the inside of the kitchen to the outside of the building, I think that passes a reasonableness to me, as long as, if they have lights in there, that the lights are safely installed. But I don't think we would need to look at having permits for putting up a tent unless, it was going to be taking up some type of encroachment of property. And even with that, I would say we should do whatever we can to help the business owner out, and not have any type of fees put on the side of that.
Okay, thank you. I want to introduce people watching at home to one of the busiest, who's about to be about the busiest guy in Oak Lawn, Don McKenna. Don, we asked you up here because businesses will be watching this, and what do you need from businesses who are approaching the village wanting outdoor dining or setting up some situation? What do you need from them? What should they be doing right now?
Well, I think after discussing with our staff a bit, almost every restaurant, every bar that wishes to open is going to be a little different. And I'd like to see some type of plans from the businesses, a site plan or something, showing me us what their plans are, where they want to locate their tent, where their lot lines are, where the neighbors are, where their parking is going to be. I'd also, what other plans do they have in mind? I mean, what is their seating plan? How many seats are going to be at the table? What's their spacing? What's the proximity to the sidewalks and whatever? Are they going to have electric? Are they going to have heat in the tent? All that type of information we're going to need. It's a lot easier, to have somebody move the tent on paper than it is after the tent has been, installed. And if they put it right up against the lot line, right up against the neighbor's home, we don't, at that point, we don't want to say, hey, take it down and relocate it. It's a lot easier to take out the eraser and move it on the paper than it is.
But a tent is not required. They could just set up tables out there too, right?
I believe so. But, again, that's part of it. What are they going to do? I mean, again, we're sitting here, blocks away from these restaurants. We have no idea what they're doing. But it's a lot easier, like I said, to make the changes on paper than it is to set it all up and then have to relocate it. Again, we don't want the seating area or the tent or whatever located right next to the lot line, right next to a residential home. And what are the hours going to be? Again, I mean, if this is a place that's used to being open till midnight or later, and you've got a single-family home right next to it, that's a concern to us.
Good, thank you. Chief, someone has okay, so Don, so someone, can you give your phone number, please, so businesses who have questions can call, or is email the better way?
Either one, we are in the office. We're not available to meet yet.
Okay.
But we are in the office. Our phone number is 708-499-7800. Again, 499-7800. And again, email, we're also available by email. That's permits, PERMITS, @oaklawn-il.gov.
Good, okay, very good. And, I appreciate all the effort you're putting into this. It's just about every business all at once wants the same thing, and, we want to move things along as quickly as we can. I have a question for council with respect to liquor licenses. Can the board vote at this meeting to extend indoor licenses to outdoor during the pandemic?
No, we don't have anything on the agenda for that, but we could
But it does say action to amend village regulations.
I don't think that's sufficient notice.
Okay. So
If
we-
you want to, what
Meeting.
we can do is, because we could do a remote call-in special board meeting.
Okay, we need to do
and-
it before June 1st, guys.
Yeah, so, we could do it on whatever, between now and then, and I'm sure if you want to give me some direction, I can come up with whatever you want vis-à-vis, outdoor dining, if temporary outdoor dining.
Correct.
Monday through Friday, or Monday through Thursday, whatever you want to do, something like that, Sunday through Thursday till 11 o'clock, weekends till midnight. I mean, I think we wouldn't want to go past that. We should probably follow more of our normal guidelines that, because of noise complaints. I think Don McKenna kind of touched on some of the things, proximity to neighbors and others. We certainly want to be cognizant of that, so we can definitely put something together rather quickly on that.
Okay.
But, I just need some guidance from the board.
Sure. Is the board supportive of that?
I think that's the goal of the board, to waive the fees, not the safety aspects. So I would strongly support that.
Okay.
If I could add something as well, Mayor.
Yes, Chief.
Something we could think about is, as you had mentioned, the way some of the businesses are set up, maybe we could close some of the alleys for those businesses. The problem may become though, as I know, as in the Whistle, they have some businesses next to them.
Right.
Close that full alley off, they may not be able to get to the alley during business hours, but if they're closed, I mean, could we maybe look at doing something like that for them?
Yeah,
Or
it's not up to us to come up, it's up to them to come to us and tell us what,
Okay.
Just on that note,
what
that's
they would
something
like,
else.
what they would like to do.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Trustee Mallow, I didn't mean to cut anybody off. But that's what we're seeing in a lot of other villages and towns, and if you want, we can look at those closing rights of ways, other ways like that, to allow them more seating outdoors that they wouldn't maybe have other access to because of like 95th Street in this case, or other areas that we're not thinking of right as we sit here, that, there's an opportunity where they can't, there's not enough when we're looking at, Don's looking at parking and safety issues and how does that all come together with their plan? We can look at opportunities to look at closing rights of ways temporarily and allow them, again, being added as an additionally insured, an indemnification waiver for the village, a safety, the chief may look at barricades, whatever have you, but not to overcomplicate it, but if they come up with a plan and come to us, we can certainly review it, and we can get there, legally, and protect the village that way and do these temporary, I don't want to use the term a vacation of a right-of-way, but a temporary use of the right-of-way, to allow for, as Paul, Trustee Mallow pointed out, whatever plan a business they came up with now. We can't close the right lane of 95th Street, that would be too dangerous, for example. But there may be other ways, the alley may be an option, right?
Right.
Thank you.
And people can do valet parking and move the parking to a different location and have more room available for,
And my final point on this more to Trustee Desmond's point, is that, this is so fluid and so ever-changing that, as we move through this, we have to be very, very flexible, I think, is the other point that I would, so I don't, not against that, we're gonna have a lot of applications, but this is ever-changing, and we have to be flexible and fluid with that as well, since the beginning of this.
so it sounds
Mayor,
like, yes,
Just
trustee.
one other
Dudley.
question. Did someone say that for the tents, that the walls had to be closed?
They should be open,
It should be
Be
open.
open?
open,
Okay.
yeah.
Right, and I would point out, I relooked at that, and those, of course, are guidelines, right? And I don't, not to throw caution to the wind again, as Trustee Phelan said, but, I think there's, we all understand the logic behind it, but I don't think we would have our chief running around, or Don running around. It's common sense at some point, right?
Good. Okay, so I think the board should plan on having a special meeting before June 1st, which would incorporate anything that the restaurants and establishments are asking for, that we would vote on anything we need to be doing, as well as the liquor issue.
Right.
Anything else we would need to consider before?
I just think one thing is that this board should do is set the policy on the hours. Opening and closing, I think opening's fine, it's the closing hours. What time do we want the outdoor dining, drinking to stop at, and then, so that's what I would just need. That's something that we're gonna have to set the policy on, village-wide.
Good. So think about that. Don, if you have other things you think that we should be doing to help you get what you need done, please let us know. Okay, any other comments from anyone on this? Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move to item 11, and that's the village clerk's report.
Approval of semi-monthly disbursements, number 2020-10D, dated May 26, 2020, in the amount of $1,765,109.01.
Thank you. May I have a motion on 11A, please?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. That was trustee Stalker, seconded by
I'll second.
trustee Phelan. Thank you. Any discussion? Let's call that vote, please.
Trustee Desmond?
Yes.
Trustee Phelan?
Yes.
Trustee Vorderer?
Yes.
Trustee Mallow?
Yes.
Trustee Stalker?
Yes.
Trustee Oliniechek?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you. Under my report, I just want to thank everyone, for these difficult times. I want to thank the staff, I want to thank Chief, and I want to thank this board in particular for really caring and going the extra mile to do what we need to be doing. So, Trustee Phelan, you were spot on when you said, when you look at the data clearly shows who's at risk with this pandemic and who isn't at risk. But, 21% of our village is over 65, and of those less than 65, many of them are living with people who are 65. So we need to, measure everything that we're doing with safety and care. And, I just think, all the measures that we take, these masks, they sure are a pain. They're unpleasant to wear. I can hardly breathe. People can't see what I'm saying or my expression. It's so hard, but, I want to get to the other side of this. I really know all of us do, and to do what we can. So with that, I'm going to go to item 13, Executive Session 2020-04 for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity, and 2, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees and their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. 3, the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body, including meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired, and the setting of a price for sale or lease property owned by the public body. May I have a motion on 13?
Move to go into
So
executive.
moved.
Okay, Trustee Phelan made that motion, seconded by Trustee Oliniechek. Any discussion?
Mayor, can we have Tom Swass stay for executive
Sure.
session for one element of it? And
Sure.
then, thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other discussion? Let's call that vote, please.
Trustee Desmond?
Yes.
Trustee Phelan?
Yes.
Trustee Vorder?
Yes.
Trustee Mallow?
Yes.
Trustee Stalker?
Yes.
Trustee Oliniechek?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you.
10:04
So
p.
we are going into
AM.
executive